Did you buy Assassin's Creed 3, Brotherhood, Far Cry 3, Splinter Cell Blacklist, Silent Hunter 5, Driver San Francisco? There's good news and bad news. You've probably already heard the bad news. Ubisoft's killed the multiplayer modes of the games you bought, and they've taken down the DLC too, even if you paid for it. It's hard to calculate the loss incurred by the players who bought these games. It's impossible to quantify the loss of the multiplayer modes, as there was nothing quite like Splinter Cell Blacklist and Assassin's Creed 3 multiplayer. Ubisoft's announcement of their impending online termination sparked a public outcry that forced Ubisoft to delay the destruction. Decommissioning online services for older games is something we do not take lightly, but it is also a necessity as the technology that drove these services becomes obsolete. By technology, you mean DRM. Be honest, Ubisoft. It's ironic that pirates will be unaffected as cracks do not become obsolete, unless they are Microsoft Store cracks or Denuvo cracks. But that's a story for another video, as these games were launched years before Denuvo or the Microsoft Store were even a thing. As a result, we moved the decommission date from 1st of September 2022 to 1st of October 2022, and the single-player downloadable content of several games on PC, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed 3, Far Cry 3 and Splinter Cell Blacklist, will be available to download and keep before that date. If you own those games on PC, activate your DLC before the decommissioning on 1st of October 2022 to continue playing it. Will this still work when you upgrade to a new PC? Or will Uplay force you to activate it on the new machine, only to learn that you can't because of Ubisoft? This has major implications for more recent titles like Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla, as they sold a lot of DLC and expansions that are nearly as large as the base games. The future availability of these DLC hinges on what Ubisoft thinks it can get away with, and that will be determined by how Ubisoft is handling older titles now. It's crazy how Ubisoft is still refusing to remove the activation requirement, even though they have the source code to do so, despite the fact that the only people hurt by their obstinacy are the consumers who pay to use Ubisoft's platform as they're supposed to. Pirates will continue to enjoy uninterrupted, unconditional access as these games have been cracked for nearly a decade now. There is still an active game team working on Anno at Ubisoft Mains, and a task force that was dedicated to deploying an update to Anno 2070 that will upgrade the game and replace its old online services, allowing players to enjoy its online features into the future. While this is better than nothing, why is Anno 2070 the only game that Ubisoft has spared from execution? Why do the multiplayer modes of Assassin's Creed 3, Bloodhood, Revelations and Splinter Cell Blacklist deserve to die? Did the people who bought those games not pay you for the multiplayer you advertised, Ubisoft? You have the resources to update the multiplayer services of all these games, but clearly you have no concern for the consumers who paid you for them. The good news is there may be something consumers can do about it, and this should interest those who bought not just the games that Ubisoft has just killed, but also those who play The Crew, The Division, For Honor, The Crew 2, The Division 2, Rainbow Six Extraction, Ghost Recon Breakpoint and every other always online game. For this is the fate that awaits them. As a multiplayer-only title, you'll be unable to play the game going forward. How the hell is this acceptable? If I sold you a vehicle then set it ablaze, that would be a criminal offense and you would have recourse for the losses you incur. Why do these corporations think they can get away with destroying the products they've sold you? Some might say these companies grant themselves the right to do what they want in the terms they force you to agree to before they let you pay the game you paid them to play. Is there anything you can do about it though? It looks like there is, and funnily enough, the solution may be in the same documents that Ubisoft has written to give themselves the right to do whatever they want. This video will come in handy when Ubisoft inevitably kills a game you do play, though we'll probably revisit the issue then to analyze if anything has changed. So please subscribe, press the bell and select all. Sharing this video would be awesome too. Follow us on Twitter while you're at it and feel free to join our Discord if you use it. Let's begin by examining the terms of use of Ubisoft services. To keep it brief, we'll only discuss the most relevant parts. 4.1. General. We do not guarantee that the services will be available at all times in all locations worldwide and/or on all devices. We do not guarantee that we will continue to offer any service for any minimum period of time. We reserve the right to terminate all or part of the services at any time. If you think the word services doesn't sound like it includes games, the terms of use has that covered. The Ubisoft services include the games, downloadable content, season passes, and other game software contained on disc or other physical medium or downloaded or streamed, and other software products and online and mobile services, including their online functions and other features, together with any of their update and upgrade, the relevant websites, the Uplay platform and any other Ubisoft platform, the Uplay Plus subscription service, the live events hosted, the servers, software and the framework through which they are provided to you, currently or in the future by Ubisoft Entertainment SA or any of its subsidiaries or affiliated companies, including Ubisoft EMEA, SAS and Ubisoft Limited. How could this possibly justify depriving you of the games they sold you? This product is licensed to you, not sold. Ubisoft or its licenses grants you a non-exclusive, non-transferable, non-sub-licensed, non-commercial and personal license to install and/or use the product in whole or in part, and any product, the license, for such time until either you or Ubisoft terminates this EULA. Does this mean Ubisoft can destroy the product you paid for and keep the money you paid for it? It depends on the country in question. Ubisoft is a French company and France is a member of the European Union. This is what the European Union's official website has to say about companies' terms and conditions. EU law sets out some fairness and transparency requirements for contracts you sign with consumers. EU requirements apply to any contract term which has not been individually negotiated with the consumer, such as usual standard contract terms drafted in advance. The standard contract terms used in the course of your business, whether they are called terms and conditions or a part of a detailed contract, have to be fair. Under EU law, standard contract terms must not be contrary to the requirement of good faith or disadvantage consumers in terms of rights and obligations in relation to sellers' suppliers. Unfair contract terms are not binding. If specific terms in a contract are unfair, they are not binding on consumers and you may not rely on them, even if the consumer has signed the contract. Here are some situations where contracts' terms may be judged unfair under EU rules. Compensation if you don't deliver. Terms which inappropriately exclude, limit consumers' rights to compensation if you don't perform your side of the contract. Regulations like this have some effect, as seen in this clause in Ubisoft's terms of use. When we acknowledge that a content you purchased is unusable due to our fault, our liability will be limited to providing you with the content of an equivalent value chosen by us. Our goods come with guarantees that cannot be excluded under the Australian consumer law. You are entitled to a replacement or refund for a major failure and compensation for any other reasonably foreseeable loss or damage. You are also entitled to have the goods repaired or replaced if the goods fail to be of acceptable quality and the failure does not amount to a major failure. While it's good to see some provision for consumers to seek compensation, there are still clauses in Ubisoft's terms that feel unfair by EU standards. The examples of unfair contracts provided by the EU website includes cancellation at short notice, terms which authorize you to terminate a contract with no fixed end date at short notice, except where absolutely justified. This might address the following clause in the terms of use of Ubisoft services. We may suspend or close your account and your ability to use one or more services or part of the services at any time automatically and at the sole discretion where, for any other reason in relation to your actions in or outside of the services. This sounds similar to this example the EU cites as an unfair contract, which may be the most important example of them all. Get out clause in your favour. Terms which allow you to get out of providing a service just because it doesn't suit you, but which still bind the consumer. This example is reminiscent of this section in Ubisoft's terms. We do not guarantee that the services will be available at all times in all locations worldwide and/or on all devices. We do not guarantee that we will continue to offer any service for any minimum period of time. We reserve the right to terminate all or part of the services at any time. The EU also cites this as an example of an unfair contract. One-sided changes to a product or service. Terms which allow you to make changes to the product or service to be provided unilaterally and without a valid reason. This might apply to the following paragraph in Ubisoft's end-user license agreement. EULA 9. Ubisoft may modify the product for any reason or without any specific reason, at any time and at its entire discretion, in particular for technical reasons such as updates, maintenance operations and/or resets to improve and/or optimize the product. You agree that the product may install or download the modifications automatically. You agree that Ubisoft may stop to support previous versions of the product upon availability of an updated version. Ubisoft's channel partners and associated service providers shall have no obligation to furnish any maintenance or customer support with respect to the product. This is similar to another example of an unfair contract cited by the EU website. One-sided changes to the contract. Terms which allow you to alter a contract unilaterally unless the contract states a valid reason for doing so. This could apply to the following section of Ubisoft's end-user license agreement. Ubisoft reserves the right in its sole and absolute discretion to revise, update, change, modify, add to, supplement, or delete certain terms of this EULA for security, legal, best practice or regulatory reasons. Such changes will be effective with, or as applicable, without prior notice to you. The EU also includes this as a potentially unfair contract. One-sided compliance with obligations. Terms obliging customers to fulfill all of their obligations where you don't have to abide by yours. Could this apply to the following section of Ubisoft's EULA? You hereby agree to defend, indemnify and keep indemnified Ubisoft and its affiliates, their licenses, channel partners and associated service providers and their subcontractors against any claim or alleged claims, liabilities, losses, damages, and all costs, including lawyer fees, directly or indirectly attributed to your fault and/or resulting from a violation of any provision of this EULA. You expressly acknowledge that use of the product is at your own risk. To the fullest extent permissible under applicable law, the product is supplied on an as-is and as-available basis. Ubisoft licenses, channel partners and associated service providers do not make and hereby disclaim any guarantees, conditions, warranties of any kind, expressed, implied or statutory or other terms including as to a. its conformity, accuracy, currentness, completeness, reliability or security. b. its suitability for a particular use. c. implied warranties of title, non-infringement. d. its market value, or E. your satisfaction. Ubisoft does not warrant that the product will be uninterrupted or error-free, that defects will be corrected, or that the product is free of viruses or other harmful components. To the fullest extent permissible under applicable law, in no event will Ubisoft licenses, channel partners, and associated service providers be liable for loss or damage suffered in connection with the use of the product or any related third-party service. This includes, without limitation, a. all losses of any kind, whether in tort, including for negligence or breach of statutory duty, contract, misrepresentation, whether innocent or negligent, or otherwise. b. direct loss. c. accidental loss. d. incidental loss. e. consequential loss. And f. indirect loss. The EU also cites this as an unfair contract. Limited rights to legal action. Terms which restrict how and where consumers can take legal action and obliging them to provide proof, which is the responsibility of the other party to the contract. Could this address the paragraph in the terms of use of Ubisoft services? Your sole remedy in the event of a dispute with us is to, if applicable, seek damages for your losses and cease to use the services and terminate your account. The EU website also has standards for the responsibility of interpretation of contracts, as they cite this as an example of an unfair contract. One-sided interpretation of the contract. Terms where only you have the right to interpret any clause of the contract and to decide whether the product or service complies with the contract. Could this apply to the last three words of the clause in the terms of use of Ubisoft services? When we acknowledge that a content you purchased is unusable due to our fault, our liability will be limited to providing you with the content of an equivalent value chosen by us. When we acknowledge that a content you purchased is unusable due to our fault. What was it that Ubisoft said about the games they killed? Closing the online services for some older games allows us to focus our resources on delivering great experiences for players who are playing newer and more popular titles. You'll be unable to play multiplayer. Additionally, the installation and access to downloadable content will be unavailable. Does that not sound like Ubisoft is acknowledging the content you purchased is unusable due to their fault? Will you submit a case to ask them to provide a content of an equivalent value? If you decide to demand equivalent content through a support ticket, let us know how it goes in the comment section below. It gets even better if you're an Australian consumer. Our goods come with guarantees that cannot be excluded under the Australian consumer law. You're entitled to a replacement or refund for a major failure and compensation for any other reasonably foreseeable loss or damage. You are also entitled to have the goods repaired or replaced if the goods fail to be of acceptable quality and the failure does not amount to a major failure. Losing access to the multiplayer modes of the games you bought sounds like major failure to me. Wouldn't you agree? The fact that Ubisoft deliberately killed the multiplayer component of this game sounds like a foreseeable loss to me. What about you? It sounds like Australians who bought these games may be entitled to refunds. Will you demand your money back? If you do submit your case to Ubisoft, feel free to share the results in the comment section below.